Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to iHumEn Evening Talk series. So during this talk, we will bring together experts in related area human-centered engineering. As we know, due to the pandemic COVID-19, the teaching and learning process has been moved from offline to online platform that defined as a distant or remote learning becoming new norm of this post-COVID-19 era. Due to the demand of effective remote or online teaching and learning activities from the lowest level such as kindergarten or preschool education until the higher level of university or professional courses, the eligibility of a remote and online learning material become highly essential. So during this pandemic, TVET, teaching technical and vocational education and training and STEM, science, technological, engineering and mathematics are these two areas that facing the larger difficulty in the delivering of the learning content to the learners. Practical work such as experimental tasks and lab activity are the must element to equip the learners with the industry standard skill and the knowledge. However, the conversion is needed from traditional physical conduct to the innovative online tasks so that the learners still can obtain the practical skill and knowledge through the fully online TVET or STEM course during the pandemic. Thereby, it is a big challenge to the educator provider to retain the quality of TVET or STEM education through the innovative multimedia learning content development. So today, we will discuss the controversial term among academic and practitioner in the game and education industry, which is gamification and game-based learning. So let me start by reading some definition by Oxford Dictionary. They say that gamification means the use of elements of game playing in another activity, usually in order to make the activity more interesting. While there is no specific meaning of game-based learning in Oxford Dictionary, however, Google gives some meaning, say that game-based learning is a learning that is facilitated by the use of game. Anyway, we are not going to debate about the term. Today, we will be the webinar that we are more sharing of our panel's experience about involving with both gamification and game-based learning. And together with us in this webinar series, iHumEn Evening Talk, we have three great speakers and personality. Yeah. Please welcome Mr. Santeri Koivisto, the CEO of TeacherGaming from Finland. Next, we have Mr. Sheikh Faleigh, Sheikh Mansor, the founder of the Futurist Foundation. And also, we have Mr. Tim W., the founder of the indiegamesplus.com. So the format of our webinar today, we have 3 rounds. Yeah. So for the first round is about the introduction and about the experience that both of our panels have gone through, the process of their experience, and maybe they can share about the success story of their involvement in the industry of game or gamification. In the second round, we will give some question related to gamification and game-based learning. And after that, for the third round, we will have question and answer session from our viewers out there. And once again, thank you very much for all the viewers who joining us through 2 channels, actually, iHumEn YouTube, yeah, and also FB Live, iHumEn. Let me introduce a bit our first panel today, Santeri Koivisto, a classroom teacher by training. Santeri started his first company during university. He has now spent about 10 years building edtech companies, and the last 2 in the academia, turning anecdotes to evidence in the game-based learning. He is the founder of Minecraft Edu. All right. We should start the ball rolling by asking a question to Mr. Santeri. Yeah. There's a confusion about the term gamification and game-based learning. From your own definition, what is the gamification and game-based learning, and what is the difference and similarity? And you can give example. But before that, I think you can introduce more about yourself. Please, Santeri.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you for the invitation and hosting this, and thanks for inviting me to share my thoughts. Great to be here. First time doing this with you guys, so looks like audience is already getting fired up, so that's great. So yes, like what you mentioned, my name is Santeri Koivisto. I come from Finland. Currently, I've done like 3 startup journeys from beginning to an end, and now starting in a way a 4th one. First as a side hustle, but it's going to grow eventually. So my first classroom teacher by training, but during the university I already started a tutoring company, and that company was a complete pancake. It was like a complete, not a single tutoring hour was sold. Complete failure. But this brings me to my first success story I want to share, like in the middle here. It was that I realized that this business is not going to work in about 6 months. So I only hit my head against the wall for 6 months and realized and decided to quit. I'm not suggesting that you should be quitting your projects, but I think that when you are working on something, there is an evidence and information accumulating, and at some point you realize this might not work. And then it's your call if you decide to actually fail with the project. And I think that 6 months was a very good failure for me. So it was a very successful failure. And to prove you that, there has been about 10 years now from that start. And there is one company still in Helsinki who's doing exactly the same thing and still failing. So unfortunately, they are using a lot of their human capital still, just building a lot of loss. But that's another story. But the second startup that I was starting to work on was the company that built Minecraft Edu. Really a company that started from one email to Carl Manet. So I think of that, like what separates entrepreneurs from the others are the entrepreneurs take the initiative. So my initiative that day was to send one email to Carl Manet, the CEO of Mojang, and all of a sudden I had the IP of one of the world's most soon to be world's most popular games and valuable games. So take the initiative. So that's I would say that's the other success story there. Third company, well, the Minecraft Edu was acquired by Microsoft eventually. The third one was a company called 5 More Minutes. We were building a very ambitious platform for teachers to use entertainment games in their classroom teaching. The pitch was very strong. The value proposition was very strong. I was able to actually open India markets for that business, but the product was just not ready. And why we were not able to really finish the product was that we had problems with the team, the core founding team. And when my first kid arrived, I decided that now it's for me to time to step down. And unfortunately, that company was not a success. But that's we received a lot of funding, and it was a very interesting and exciting journey. So I think it was a very positive experience as a whole, regardless of not being a success in the end. But currently, I've been in academia now for a couple of years. I'm helping entrepreneurs, like students who want to build companies in our university. I also work in the internationalization of our university, and basically the opportunity that I have currently is that I work in a research group that focuses on AI and robotics. And I have the opportunity to see like how people are training people to work in the 4th industrial revolution. So how humans are teaching robots and humans are teaching humans to teach robots and work side by side with robots and AI. And it's pretty exciting. So hopefully we can share about that at some point as well in the future. But really, I think that's about my background. As you can see from my T-shirt, I play the piano, and I want to evangelize that. But yeah, but now I think that should everybody do their introduction, or should I go to the gamification, game-based learning question?
Yeah, I think you can go straight to the question, and then later we'll get back to Sheikh Faleigh and Tindal.
Cool. All right. So cool. So I typically steer away when it comes to semantics. So but I think that when it comes to these two concepts or terms, I think a bit of context is appropriate here, because both of these words are used very freely to basically mean the same thing, which is not exactly correct. And especially if you are talking to researchers and teachers, it's good to know a bit of the background of like what generally, for example, the Western education community refers with each of these concepts. So gamification is typically, a layer on top of like an existing mechanic. Let's say I am training my kid to go to the potty, silly example, but I might gamify that for him to give stickers every time it's successful. So that's sort of gamifying the potty training. In the same way, a classroom teacher in a class, let's say for every good behavior in the class, like when the school is the class is behaving well, they give, let's say, a star on the board, and after 10 stars they watch a movie because of good behavior. So it's like a gamifying something that it should already be there, but it might be a bit dull, and the gamification can make it more enjoyable. And also to build positive routines like good behavior or getting to the potty in time, things like this. But from a puristic point of view, especially if we talk about learning, you might ask that, okay, why should we turn the focus away from learning itself? Shouldn't like learning be exciting? And why do we need extra layers of, rewards and engagement in order to make people learn? So this, of course, is one sort of criticism, but at the same time, if through gamification we can create positive behavior in learning, great. Like people love to learn, wonderful. But let's say if somebody is just learning to get points, for example, I think it's in a sort of a bad thing for the learning itself and bad use for gamification. Then we should go into the root problem why this is not interesting, rather than trying to gamify something that is not seen as interesting. So if you think about like a very standard math game that is like multiple choice, multiplication, addition, things like that, that's very typical gamification in a classroom format, and it mostly just provides like a meta game for a math learning to reward the player with points or some other maybe fun skins for their character, something like that. So that's sort of gamification. But now game-based learning, on the other hand, in my books, it's when the game mechanic itself. Well, I'm sure that the audience understands game mechanic, like what you do in the game. Like in a shooting game, you can shoot, you can move, you can communicate with other players, you plant a bomb, whatever. Okay, maybe not the classroom example. Actually, it has been getting popular in schools as well. Counter-Strike, for example, but those are the game mechanics, the actual mechanics in the game. So I think that game-based learning is at its best when the real-life phenomena, let's say about particle physics, where the game uses the same tools and same phenomena to manipulate particle physics in order for you to practice how neutrons, electrons, and protons are interacting with each other. That's like a really interesting and solid way of using game-based learning connected with game mechanics that resonate with real-life mechanics. So that builds the understanding of how the real-life mechanic actually works. And I think that's the beauty of game-based learning. If you think about a bit more sophisticated example, let's say SimCity, or even better, City Skylines, very detailed simulation. How do you connect all the different mechanics to real life city management mechanics, and the amount of complexity in that type of game is just mind-blowing, and it just allows the player to learn about these hyper complex topics that even the best of our city government cannot really properly handle, and these students in the class can figure it out. So I think that the game-based learning truly has the potential to, disrupt how we are teaching skills, because now skills are in many countries hardly integrated to classrooms. But when it comes to a topic that we can then connect to game mechanics, and the game mechanics also teach skills, I think that the skill learning gap can be solved with games. Of course, gamification as a pitch for a teacher is very easy. It's very convenient. Just do whatever you are doing, plus gamify it. But game-based learning, of course, requires literacy. You sort of need to understand what is happening in the game, what's happening in the mechanics. So game-based learning is, in a way, much more difficult thing to grasp, especially if you are not like a solid gamer, or if you're not an avid gamer already yourself. But I don't think that any of these are, bad, or they have their sort of purpose. I think like gamification has the opportunity to keep us, motivated, to keep us, doing something, build good routines, and also boost motivation. And motivation increases learning outcomes, so it is positive in that sense. At the same time, game-based learning enables, learning and demonstrating like these hyper-complex phenomena, and also, teach you some of these higher-order skills. But if not designed properly, of course, the game can be so difficult that it's hard for a person to approach. So, the learning opportunity goes in vain. But I hope that gives you a bit of perspective about gamification and game-based learning with a couple examples. And of course, doing this properly, like going into details with this, maybe we do a 2-hour lesson about this or lecture at some point, but this is for now. So hope this gave you a bit of a context.
Thank you, Santeri. I think it's a bit long explanation as well, and I hope that the audience can get a lot of idea on what is actually the different or the similarity of the gamification as well as the game-based learning. And of course, now we're having today, almost every teacher have to think creatively on how to create their own content, especially to get the student, the participant interested on what they are teaching. All right. So thank you for now, Santeri, about the explanation. And let's move to the next panels. Sheikh Faleigh and Sheikh Mansor. Let me read his profile a bit, before I ask him to explain more detail about his experience and himself. So Sheikh Mansor is the founder and futurist of the Futurist Foundation, and he has mentored many young entrepreneurs and some high-grown potential company in Malaysia and in Indonesia as well since the year 2000, including Gamepreneur. In addition, he has mentored many successful games, including Upin and Ipin, which is very popular in Malaysia as well as Indonesia as well. Based on this is Upin and Ipin. I think everyone know in Malaysia. So it's a famous Malaysian IP for your information, Santeri, or maybe our global audience. And Campus and the chemistry learning gamification, and the globally renowned and viral Sarah is Missing. So Faleigh is a certified in the Malaysian Book of Record as the youngest entrepreneur in Malaysia for establishing his first company at the age of 18 in 1994. So you can guess how old or how young he is today. So he is currently creating one business ecosystem between Malaysia and Indonesia, and also including the game industry. And he has been acknowledged by many since the foundation of establishment of the Futurist Foundation. So Faleigh, if you can add more about yourself, if you want to share something related to your success story, especially related to the game-based learning and so on. Please, Sheikh.
Okay. I'm not going to add any more of my background because you have fulfilled that obligation already. Until I feel like I'm going to get an award from you. Okay. I would like to just say thank you for having me. The Futurist Foundation. Even before I formed the Futurist Foundation in 2010. I am in few projects of gamification. One of the first game company in Malaysia did game development in year 2000, and they did a few gamification or maybe that time is game-based learning with some banks on how to save your money, but in a more fun campaign. So I just want to touch a bit on the question just now that you have thrown to Santeri. To me personally, gamification is exciting. Making sure that whatever that you're going to synergize, whether it's education or film or music or whatever content, into a game. When you synergize that, it has to be fun and very interesting. So content-oriented, fun-oriented is very, very important. To me personally, game-based learning, I counted a few people who try to gamify mathematics or gamify English, but I would categorize them as digitalizing digitalizing education content, and where it's really different than what a gamification synergy with all the other elements would be, because somehow rather when they are trying to make education more fun, instead of using a physical book, they're thinking of digitalizing some of the education method where many fail because they forgot the one important element of game, that is fun. So along my during my projects with people that I mentor, or projects that we develop ourselves in our incubator and accelerator, we do emphasize a lot on fun. Yeah, so comes to the project with OpenEPIN, the project with ChemCaper is a chemistry game. So chemistry is very boring, but somehow we managed to make it very fun. People, kids playing the game without knowing that they're actually learning chemistry and understanding how the function of the alchemy in the periodic table. Then and then, like you mentioned just now, a project with Sarah is missing is more like a horror psychological game. So we gamify film, music, and also horror into a game. So it's a very unique mechanics. So we try that, and we are working with another different game now with Santeri, and also of course inshallah UTM on other projects to make another benchmark on gamification. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheikh Faleigh, for the sharing of your experience. Later, I think you will have to share more. I think there's a lot of things that is still hidden from your background. Yeah, let's try to call upon Team W. Yeah, I think he has some internet connection problem that maybe we can try to hear his voice for a while. By I'm just introducing you, Tim, by reading your profile, and then maybe you can add more about yourself. Yeah. So Tim W is okay. So Tim W is a world-renowned game writer and critic. He is the founder of the hysterical indiegames.com, and now become known as indiegamesplus.com. A news portal that responsibility to features indie game studio that end up being big and famous and made a lot of money. One of them is Minecraft. Yeah. So team create many benchmark initiatives in the game industry and mentored many game studios and later created their own studio under the roof of GCM under the Futurist Foundation. So the first project that he mentored is Camp Campus, yeah, and the ideation of the global viral game Sarah is missing as well, yeah. Then together with other partners around the globe, and team is always busy in making another benchmark of the gaming and the gamification project. Okay, team, I think if you can add more about what I just read about your profile, you can want to share some experience related to any of your success story.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Good evening, everyone. I think that was a lengthy introduction as well. I'll just add to it a bit because this is something, before this, I was actually working as a writer, editor, and journalist for IndieGames.com. That has been my work for the past 15 years. And Indie Games Plus was just recently founded as well, around 3 or 4 years ago. And only this year, I've just started working for itch.io, which is a digital distribution platform that is open for all game studios, game designers, and game developers. Currently, we actually are hosting more than 200,000 games. We are also helping to run bundles as well. So our current bundle is a bundle that is for the Palestinian aid, and that bundle itself has raised over 500,000 so far. And those are the kinds of things that we are actually promoting and pushing for, so that it's not only to help developers to make revenue, to be able to continue to develop games, but also to give them the platform and the power to make change as well.
All right.
So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Please continue.
Maybe you have a question for me?
Yeah, after this.
Okay. Maybe I'll add my 2 cents to the topic as well. For game-based learning and gamification, I think it's important that for any game developers or game studios to think about when designing this or making a game, to think about what kind of objective that they want to achieve. Whether it's something that for like the course, whether they want the participants to actually learn something from the course, or do they want them to get better at it? That means through repetition or through practicing or things like that. So in that case, if it's repetition or practicing, then gamification might be useful. But for something that they want the participants to learn, then I think game-based learning method would be useful for them to apply into the game development.
Okay, thank you, Tim, for the additional thought about the game-based learning and gamification. All right, we'll back to Sheikh Faleigh about question that I would like to ask to add more information and knowledge to the audience about gamification and game-based learning. So currently, there are a lot of game-based learning products available in the market. What is your general opinion about the gamification element in most of the game-based learning product, and then how the learning process that in the game-based learning can be gamified?
Okay. Maybe I touch about the most important thing in the game making industry. Monetization, yeah. If you, on the context of Malaysia, or even some part of the world, people don't really like to buy things when they're playing the game. You know, unless it's a super power up fun game like X-Men or or Justice League or something, where even my son, when he was small, finish up my credit card with all the super power ups. So unless you're making unless there is a fun and big IP games, then maybe you will spend for your kids or you spend for yourself. And that is a fun game. That is just a fun game. There's no much learning except for maybe your concentration and your decision making skills, but not on education much. Yeah. So comes to game-based learning, especially on education, it's going to be more difficult for the developers to make money, because the parents just don't know how to spend, whether is spending $10 enough per month or not. We have so many game-based learning like Lingo Kids or even Mickey Mouse or whatever in the market. So it comes to monetization. If I take famous IP, game-based learning or gamification projects, the in-app purchase is very, very enticing. Yeah, they will make sure that you play the game for a long time, and you already stuck. Yeah, you already become addictive to the game, and you end up have to buy things to continue play, because if you don't, then you can't. You have to wait for tomorrow and so on. So that's very, very easy for those big IPs, but for other games that doesn't have a big IP, it is more challenging for them to actually make money by having the in-app purchase. But me and team, we prove people wrong by when we had the Sarah is Missing game, where it's not famous. It was new, but end up we have 100 million views worldwide on YouTube, played by Markiplier and so on. On the other hand, we do have some challenges for Camp Paper, because it's a new thing, but we had a very, very good marketing strategy. And when we launched Camp Paper, we were the first Malaysian game company that launched in San Francisco Game Developers Conference 2016, and we got I mean, that's how I met. That's how me and team met Santeri when we launched our Camp Paper game. And in fact, many people have loved the game. They really appreciate the gamification process that we put into, and even and the game developer of the game is a school, So, and even the kids who play the games, they basically learn chemistry, not just learning chemistry. They actually can understand the function of the alchemy on the periodic table, because every alchemy we create a character, So things like that is very important when you want to develop especially education game. Comes to what available in the market now. I think Malaysian game studios don't really focus on education or gamification, but I think they should, because it's easy to have a payment gateway now, because even I think for my kids, I just do a monthly deductible with using Touch and e-wallet, Touch and Go, things like that. So there's so many payment gateway available. Attitude of parents are very into online now, So they are not like a long time ago where they don't want even to buy anything online, not even food. Now everybody is buying online. And the behavior, the customer behavior, or the parent behavior now in Malaysia is very good for any game developer to start to develop a good game content and few gamification projects, because the attitude is already there. for them to buy online.
Yeah. Thank you, Sheikh, for the explanation on your thought about the gamification element, yeah, and also as a game-based learning game now that is in the market. And we know that now, for example, you said about Chem Campus, yeah. So a learning process is sometimes it's not necessary to follow exactly whatever things have been shown in the textbook or in the syllabus, but you can use the game element to enforce on the game for the education. So in the education, normally we need to have like a repeating and repeat element. For example, to memorize some keywords or some element. In, for example, in chemistry. Yeah? So by playing game indirectly, suppose, yeah. This is the element of gamification when it's not like on directly converting the syllabus into digital form. So this is very important because normally the content have been developed by the educator, yes. But then when it's turned into the digital or they want to make it as a game, normally they don't impose or they don't put together the gamification element. But as suppose for the game-based learning, they need also to blend in the gamification element as minimum as you need to get a point, badge, and leaderboard, for example, or you need to be beyond that. Right. So let us another question to Mr. Tim W. You know that while game-based learning is focused on achieving goal and learning outcome, yeah. So this is the normal game-based learning application. However, but not all game-based learning have gamification element. Yeah, it's what I mentioned earlier. So how we can combine and blend gamification in the game-based learning?
Okay. For game-based learning, as you know, I think as everyone know that there's an objective to it, meaning that there's a learning objective that you want to achieve. What kind of knowledge or expertise that you want to impart onto the students or the participants as well. Now, gamification element is actually adding game-like elements to either an exercise or a chore or something, an activity. So gamification is like things like you may add points or badges or leaderboards to an activity so that when the participants, let's just say like maybe students or something like that, who engage in that kind of learning activity are motivated or find the fun in doing it repeatedly so that they can get better at it or gain experience from it. So this is why sometimes adding gamification element to anything at all would help to encourage the participant to learn better or have fun doing something which is rote or routine, something that usually is not fun at all. So gamification element sometimes it's like, let's say even in apps like booking hotel apps or Grab apps or Uber apps as well. Even those kind of applications or apps, they even add gamification elements into it. So things like getting points or level. That means if you achieve certain amount of points, you will level up and you gain more benefits or rewards, even though the app itself is not a game. But because they've added gamification elements in it, that means it will encourage the users to do something repeatedly, and that will help them to learn how to use the app. So these kind of things can actually be applied into education as well. So this is my opinion. So things like, I'll give another example, like in terms of gamification. Now, some like game developers or game studios, when they think about adding gamification elements into their apps or games, they would do leaderboards. So leaderboards something like if you are in an exam, correct? You would sometimes place first, or maybe you place sometimes in the middle of the class, or maybe you place last. But let's say if you do leaderboards, maybe another way of doing leaderboards is you want to show like the person who is 1 or 2 rank above you. And maybe for the leaderboard as well, you want to show a person or 2 person who is 1 or 2 rank below you. So that this actually encourages people who are, using the app or trying to learn to try to do better. Because if you are always placed at the bottom, which is usually what happens in most of these games or apps, when you are at the bottom, it does not actually encourage you or encourage the participant to do better, because you know that you have a long way to work towards to getting to the top. Now, if you show a leaderboard showing a ranking of only like 1 or 2 person or above you or 1 or 2 person below you, it actually encourages people to do better because they can see the progress. If they try harder, it also motivates them to try better as well. So this is my opinion.
Right, thank you, Tim. So I think there is a lot of question from audience in our YouTube live as well as FB live. I think if we can pick some question and we can give it to our panels. Let's see one of the question. So we have a question from Nadia Amira. She's asking, what about 3D puzzle game for famous buildings? Is it a game-based learning? So I would like to invite Santeri to give your answer about this question.
Yeah. Well, if it's just a puzzle game, let's say you are building like a jigsaw or like a 3D jigsaw that has nothing to do with actually building, let's say, buildings like architecture or engineering construction. And every time you finish a jigsaw, you get a point. And after 10 points, you unlock another jigsaw, which is another building. Well, that's gamification pretty much right there. At least, simplifying it. If we talk about the game-based learning in sort of the educational perspective to game-based learning, then it would be more like a 3D puzzle game that would actually incorporate some real-life architectural, physics, engineering, construction mechanics that, let's say, if you build it wrongly or not supported enough, it will collapse, things like that. So that would create it, in my books, towards game-based learning. Just to incorporate what Tim just mentioned, it could be that this is both. Like if you know Bridge Builder or was it like a Polybridge, for example, these simple bridge building games that they do have real life phenomena in game mechanics, like real life physics there. But at the same time, when you are successful enough, you get enough high score, then you unlock new bridges. So it can be both in that sense. But yeah, hopefully that gave you a clarity on that.
Right. Thanks, Santeri, for the question. I hope that is answering the question by Nadia just now. And let's move to the next question. Let's look at the next question by Zul Fikri. Yeah. In game industry, what gamification element is the most important? I think who want to answer this? Either Mr. Sheikh or Mr. Tim?
Maybe I'll try the question.
Thank you, Mr. Tim. Please proceed.
Okay, so for gamification elements, I think it's, as mentioned earlier by the other panels as well, I think it's important to look at the objective that you want to achieve. So the objective that you want to achieve as well would basically dictate whether you want to use like either game-based learning method in your program, or you want to add gamification elements into your apps or games as well. So as mentioned earlier, like the example that I gave, leaderboards, it can be beneficial and it can be detrimental to a learning process as well, or to encourage participants to participate in a program. So because the things that like in schools, like in exams and things like that, if you place last, you are actually not encouraged. You'll be more than likely to be demotivated to try to do better. So leaderboards may not be useful if you want to add that kind of gamification element to your program or to your game. So you might want to look at other things like maybe trophies or levels, where leveling up, if you do something repeatedly, you will increase in level. So in terms of level, you would rarely go down. You actually won't lose experience. Just like in real life, whatever that you do repeatedly, you get better at it. You won't get worse at it. So I think like in terms of gamification element, you have to study, you have to figure out what kind of objective you want to achieve before you put it in. So it's basically for the answer for this is actually malleable, and it's something that you have to look at. It's hard to answer as well.
Yeah.
Can I add one comment to that?
Yeah, sure, Santeri, please. Go on.
Yeah, so I would say that as important as the different gamification elements would be to fine tune them. I'm sure that you know this, where there's the flow in the middle, which direction this. And if it's too hard, you go to anxiety. If it's too easy, you are bored. So like fine tuning everything that, you know, you are giving enough challenge, enough reward in order to stay in the flow zone and not go over or go too little. I noticed that, you know, really good games that are like really brilliantly designed, like Candy Crush, for example, at some point you get very close to the anxiety. And then it's the moment when you are already hours invested into the game, level 250, then you put the money in order to help you just a bit to get back to the flow out of the anxiety. So just something to keep in mind. So the elements, plus also the fine tuning.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you, Santeri, about that. I mean, that is to answer the question. Is basically this gamification element is really dependent on how far you want to develop the game, the design of the game towards the user or the players. Yeah. Okay, Zul, I hope that this answering your question. Yeah. All right, let's move to another question that maybe we can pick this from Steven Yong from, I think, 4SCSB is from a game student from UTM. Yeah. So the question is, can game-based learning be implemented in higher education? Yeah. And what are the difference compared with the implementation in the preschool and the primary education? Are there any example? So I think, Sheikh, you want to answer this question? You want to pick up this question?
I'll just going to be brief because this question more to Santeri. Well, of course, it's a good start to have the idea of having a game-based learning in the subject matter of higher education, because I can't wait to finish my SPM or my higher education examination, because the textbooks were so boring. Basically, and today everybody got their SPM result, yeah, and yeah. So if you ask me, the government have to communicate with people like us and start to implement game-based learning or the gamification projects that we already have, like Camp Caper for chemistry, or the other topics that we can also gamify together with their teachers and content. Because like now, government in Malaysia, just to share with Santeri also, since the COVID pandemic and lockdowns, the Malaysian government emphasizing more on TV stations, broadcaster to deploy the so-called problems that most of the rural area doesn't have internet access. Even if they have, it's very slow, or they don't, or simply that the rural people in the village doesn't have a computer or can afford one. So the best way to deploy online is broadcast, not even online, is broadcast a TV education program. TV education program. I remember when I was like 10 years old, many years ago, 30 years ago, maybe we had a TV education channel, where I'm sad. I'm saddened that after 30, 40 years, after 30, 40 years, the government is still go back to broadcasting education, where 30 years development, they should have game-based learning at least, even it's fun or not. At least they should have some game that are based on the subject matter of geography, of English, at least, if you don't want to go as far as how we go to chemistry. So that so people will like the idea, and slowly maybe he can practice to even preschool and primary education. And maybe when these are practiced, should have done 20 years ago, by now I would expect even the university or college students of some of the methods could be taught by gamification. Even 10 years ago, I remember there is a company in UK. When I went to London, they were showing me for medical practices, they have already a virtual reality of the operation, where that can be taught. I mean now is 2021. I believe our VR is much more better, and if we would have done all this effort 20 years ago, we would have been better, instead of just still focusing on TV broadcast for the education for the school. Any example, I can't give one, because except for what we have done, that is camp paper, and maybe Santeri can also share his experience that make he and his team decided to create Minecraft Edu. Pass it to you, Santeri.
Yes. So coming from experience from working with about 20,000 schools around the world, of course, complexity of the game needs to be age appropriate. Of course, like drugs and violence, not for kids. And there is a limit when you can touch complex topics like crime or drug addiction in a game, for example. Of course, those are valuable conversation topics for for an educator to go through in a school. But really, what we have found is that, let's say up to 10 or 11-year-old in the West, and I would say maybe 1 year plus when it comes to East, for Asia, students are very naturally excited about games. So any game that you hand over pretty much, cuts the cake every time. So it's like a really like a, it's a media that is very familiar to them. It's a media that is very close to their heart and exciting. So it's very natural for them to pick up. But then when we go to 12, 13 and plus, especially when we're talking about university, the more clear it needs to be why we are playing games at school. Because people are already getting brainwashed, like after 10 years of schooling, that, hey, school is about books and papers and pens and whatnot. So all of a sudden we are playing games. So are we, wasting our time? I'm here to learn. And now really where basically any game works for 10-year-old or 11-year-old, but at, let's say, 16, 17, 18, or even university, it needs to be clear that, okay, this is maybe a simulation, or this is a very clear how this helps us to learn this. And especially, like Sheikh already mentioned, then we go to the simulations in VR, things like that are already like a sophisticated, borderline, are they even games anymore? They are more about simulations, but just well-made using game design in general, to start from easy assignments to gradually go into harder.
Yeah, so I think that should answer, beyond the question from Stephen Young. Yeah, and let's have some interaction with our audience from watching from Facebook Live, maybe you can give some like, or from this what you call YouTube as well. There is a lot of question, and we try to finish within 1 hour for this session, and we still have about 4 minutes to end this session. And for those who are still new or never heard about iHumEn, Institute of Human-Centered Engineering, our institute is the multidisciplinary institute of research in UTM, doing research related to the human-centered, come from computer science, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, biomedical engineering, sports science, as well as the psychology. So game is, I think, across all the related things. It's not only for computer science, but it's also, I mean, now game is everywhere, especially on the education, and gamification as well is everywhere. Yeah, in the shopping apps as well, booking apps, hotel, and so on. All right, I think we can see last question probably. Can we have last question from Q Kai Ran? Yeah. So the question is gamification a technology, or it is more appropriate to be called is an approach? So I open to anyone who want to share your thought about this question from Q Kairan.
Maybe I'll start. I like this question. After running incubator and accelerator for so-called game wannabe developers, me and team say that if we can just focus on good game design, if we can just focus on good game ideation, yeah, as what Tim mentioned just now, what is your objective of making a game, of that particular game or project that you want to do? What's the objective? Yeah, one is very, very important. When you know the objective, then only you can identify the content and the approach and later the design. I would not need a technology if I have a very good ideation, objective, content. Hence why the uprising of board games and card games now. You know, even in Kickstarter, you have almost 80% of the game funded on Kickstarter crowdfunding. It's not digital game; it's board games and card games. Because the approach that the developer or the creator have used is so unique, it's so uniquely needed. Also, some of the game, you know, it's fun. It's very focused on who they are targeting, you know, and approach. The approach is the most important thing, because when you do not know your objective, you do not know who you're addressing the game to, you know. And you can't just do a game and expect everybody to play. Of course, Candy Crush have broken the record for a 90-year-old grandmother also playing the game, because it is just simply a fun one-finger game. But yeah, I mean, gamification to me personally is not about technology. It's about, yeah, you can say it's about the approach. And the ideation is very important. The ideation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate. Santeri, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think you can apply gamification to anything. I mean, you can gamify your own, let's say, training. You know, get up a chocolate bar every time you do exercise. It's gamification for you. For example, it's a very simple example, or like the potty training that I was explaining at the very, very beginning. So gamification can be very crude, but it can be, you know, really. I want to repeat myself in a way that if gamification can build you as an approach, as a technique, like positive habits to go and do exercise ultimately without the chocolate bar, then it's like a great gamification that you are doing for yourself. And if you are only maybe having more chocolate bars and that mitigates the results of your training, then it's bad gamification. Well, silly example, but I'm sure that you get the point.
Great. All right. So I think we come into the end of our session. Before we end, I would like to have some last word from all of our panels, the recap of gamification versus game-based learning, or anything that you want to say as your hope on this industry and so whatsoever. I think we start with Team W.
Okay. To sum it up, I think for game-based learning and also for gamification, if you're thinking about using one method or the other, you could also think in such a way that you could use both to apply to make a better, let's say, game-based learning, because usually game-based learning involves simulation. As by simulating, it allows people to go through the experience and to learn better. Gamification is just a method to ensure that there's more retention or there's more practice or repetition, and it also motivates and encourages. So even though in a lot of themes and topics, they'll say things like gamification versus game-based learning, you don't really have to choose one or the other. You can actually do both if you want. So that's my summary.
Thank you, Tim. All right. So invite Sheikh Faleigh for your final word for this session.
For this session, because there's no final word on gamification. Just make sure that the game is fun, and you make sure you know your objective and your target audience. That's all.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Sheikh. And what about Santeri?
Well, I think the gentleman already made great points, so nothing to really add there. So one thing to mention here as well is the game design that both of our guests also have mentioned here, the other guests. So really, I think that when you crack the great idea, the great mechanics, then just start fine-tuning, making it easy for people to start, easy to get hooked on, but then at the same time hard to master. And with fine-tuning and with the different mechanics that were introduced here, I'm sure that you're gonna create great experiences. And if you are interested in learning experiences, I'm sure that game design can help you tremendously with that as well, if you wanna help people to learn, because elephants are eaten in pieces. Some weird proverb from internet.
Yeah. Prof, I just want to add one thing on the gamification. Doesn't need technology. Tim just finished a card game based on sushi.
Yeah, card based. Yeah, I think gamification, as we mentioned, is not necessary technology. It's not necessary.
No, he did a very nice card game on sushi, Japanese food. So so it's all about your objective, your target audience, and also making sure that it's fun. That's all.
Right, great. Thank you very much, guys, for all the explanation and clarification related to game-based learning and gamification. And I really hope that our audience can learn a lot from our talk through our iHumEn evening talk today. And I think we have to continue this talk with other topic later on. Yeah, I think until we meet again to all. So thank you very much and have a nice day. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bye-bye.